Daniel was a very brilliant and highly intelligent boy. He loved to read and he always performed well in school. His teachers praised him and his classmates looked up to him. But everything changed the day he lost both of his parents. After the burial, Daniel was sent to live with his uncle, Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben lived with his wife, Aunt Clara, and their three children, Felix, Joy, and Tunde. Felix was the same age as Daniel, and they were both in the same class. Daniel arrived at the new house with his small bag. He missed his parents deeply, but he hoped his new family would treat him with love and care. Come in, Uncle Ben said kindly. This is your new home now. Daniel smiled weakly and entered. Aunt Clara stood at the door, looking at him with a straight face. She didn't smile. She didn't say welcome. Daniel noticed that her eyes were sharp and cold. Later that evening, Uncle Ben called the children together. Daniel will now be staying with us, he said. Treat him like your brother. Everyone nodded, except Aunt Clara. She just looked at Daniel and said nothing. Daniel was trying to adjust to his new life, not knowing that things were about to become very hard for him. The next morning, Daniel woke up early and greeted everyone politely. He helped to sweep the sitting room and wash the plates, even though no one asked him to. He wanted to be useful in his new home. After breakfast, Aunt Clara called him into the kitchen. Her face was hard and serious. Sit down, she said coldly. Daniel sat quietly, his heart beating fast. I know you're very brilliant, she began. I already heard how you used to come first in your former school. But let me tell you something, and listen very well. Don't ever score higher than my son Felix. Daniel was shocked. He looked at her but couldn't say anything. If you ever try to shine more than him in school, you will see what I will do to you, she added. I don't want your name to be mentioned above his own. Do you hear me? Yes, ma, Daniel replied softly. From that moment, Daniel understood that he was not allowed to show how smart he really was. He felt pain in his chest, but he didn't cry. He just nodded quietly and walked out of the kitchen. He had never felt so helpless before. Daniel started his new school the following week. It was the same school Felix attended. They were placed in the same class because they were the same age. On the first day, the teacher asked everyone to introduce themselves. When it was Daniel's turn, he spoke quietly and didn't say much. He didn't mention anything about his past school or how good he was at reading. In class, Daniel never raised his hand, even when he knew the answers. When the teacher asked him to read, he pretended to struggle. He would pause, stammer, or say he didn't know the word. The teachers quickly concluded that Daniel was not a smart boy. He needs extra help, one of them told Aunt Clara during a parent teacher meeting. At home, Daniel lived in fear. Aunt Clara made sure he was always busy. He would cook, wash, sweep, and clean, while her own children relaxed. Sometimes he even did Felix's assignments without taking any credit. He was not only hiding his brilliance at school, but also being treated badly every day in the house. Daniel was scared to make any mistake or outshine Felix in any way. He kept his head down and stayed quiet, both at school and at home. He was living in fear, and nobody truly knew what he was going through. As weeks passed, everyone in school began to see Felix as one of the brightest boys in class. He answered questions, scored high marks, and even received praise from teachers. Daniel, on the other hand, was treated like he didn't know anything. Teachers stopped calling him in class. Some classmates laughed at him and whispered, he can't read. Daniel kept quiet. He never defended himself. Even when Felix mocked him at home and in school, Daniel said nothing. He was living in his cousin's shadow. In class tests, Daniel would leave most of the answers blank or write the wrong ones on purpose. He didn't want to face trouble at home. Aunt Clara had already warned him, and he didn't want to suffer more. Sometimes he sat at the back of the class and watched as Felix enjoyed all the praise that could have been his. Deep inside, it hurt badly, but he had no choice. At home, nothing changed. Daniel still did most of the house chores. He didn't get the same food or rest as the others. He was treated like a servant, not like a family member. He was a star hiding in darkness, and the world saw only his shadow. Daniel continued to live each day in silence. In school, no one paid attention to him. His classmates now believed he was truly dull. Some made fun of him when he walked past, others ignored him completely. He would sit quietly during lessons, pretending not to understand, even when the topics were very easy for him. The teachers focused more on students like Felix, who always raised their hands. At home, Daniel's life was even harder. Aunt Clara gave him all the heavy chores. He cleaned the house before anyone woke up and was the last to sleep. If he made a mistake, he got scolded or slapped. His cousins treated him like a nobody. Even the younger ones shouted at him. He didn't complain, he just obeyed, hoping one day things would change. Daniel missed his parents deeply. Sometimes he cried alone at night, pressing his face into the pillow so no one would hear. But he never stopped being respectful, kind, and humble. Though people saw him as a failure, Daniel was still the same brilliant boy inside, just hiding, suffering, and waiting. Even though Daniel was suffering at home and hiding his intelligence at school, he never stopped loving books. Late at night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Daniel would quietly take out his old textbook and storybooks that he brought from his parents' house. He hid them in a small box under his bed, covered with old clothes so no one would find them. He would light a small torch under the blanket and read silently. That was the only time he felt free. He read everything: science, literature, maths, and even computer books. His mind was sharp and he could still understand everything with ease. Daniel didn't read because of school or exams. He read because it gave him peace. It reminded him of who he really was, the smart, confident boy his parents had raised. Even when his eyes were heavy from tiredness, he forced himself to read a little every night. It was his escape from the hard life he was living. During the day, he became the dull boy again. He failed tests on purpose. He avoided class discussions. He acted confused when the teacher called him. But at night, he was the real Daniel, the genius who solved hard maths questions and taught himself new things without help. One evening, while he was helping Felix with homework, Felix became confused with a maths question. Daniel quickly solved it in his head. That's not the answer, Felix said, not believing him. Daniel gently explained it, step by step. Felix looked surprised. How did you know that? Daniel smiled and said nothing. He remembered Aunt Clara's warning. He couldn't let anyone find out how smart he really was. So he continued to hide his light, reading in secret, learning in silence, and hoping that one day, just maybe, he would be free to be himself again. It was the beginning of a new school term. The principal announced that a big inter-school quiz competition would take place in 3 weeks. All schools in the district were invited, and it was a big honor to represent the school. Each class was to pick one student who would represent them in the competition. In Dania and Felix's class, the teacher didn't waste time. Felix was chosen immediately. Felix is our best student, the teacher said proudly. He will make us proud. The whole class clapped, and Felix smiled proudly. Daniel sat at the back as usual, silent and unnoticed. In the following days, Felix began to prepare for the quiz. Teachers gave him special attention. He even got extra lessons during break time. Daniel watched from afar. He knew most of the answers to the questions Felix was struggling with, but he kept quiet. The day of the quiz finally came. It was a Friday, and the whole school gathered in the hall. Everyone was excited. The head boy and some teachers would go along with Felix to the host school. But something unexpected happened that morning. Felix woke up sick. He had a high fever and he couldn't even stand. Aunt Clara rushed to the school to beg the teachers to postpone the competition, but it was too late. We need someone else to represent the class, the teacher said, worried. Who else can go? The class was silent. No one volunteered. Then a boy shouted from the back, half joking, let Daniel go. At least he can sit there and smile. Some students laughed. But the teacher had no other choice. Daniel, she called, you're the only one left. Get your bag. You're going. Daniel froze in shock. He looked around, unsure if it was a joke. Go now, the teacher ordered. Daniel stood up slowly, his heart beating fast. This was the moment he had never prepared for. Everyone expected him to fail. No one knew they were about to see the real Daniel. Daniel sat quietly in the school bus as it moved toward the venue of the quiz competition. He held his bag tightly, his palms sweaty. He was nervous, not because he didn't know the answers, but because this was the first time he would be standing in front of a crowd and showing who he really was. He remembered Aunt Clara's warning clearly. Don't ever score higher than my son. But today, there was no way to hide. At the venue, students from different schools had already arrived. The large hall was filled with noise, excitement, and the flashing of cameras. When Daniel's school name was called, the teacher whispered, just try your best. We know you're not ready. Daniel didn't reply. He just nodded and walked to the stage. The other schools sent out their smartest students, some in glasses, some with stacks of books. Daniel stood beside them, looking calm but serious. The quiz began. The first round was English. The host asked a difficult grammar question. Before anyone else could press the buzzer, Daniel did. He answered, correct. The judges looked surprised. The second question was literature. Daniel pressed first again. Another correct answer. Then came science, mathematics, current affairs. Daniel kept pressing first, and his answers were always right. The crowd began to murmur. Who is this boy? A teacher whispered. Isn't he the one they said can't read? A student asked. By the end of the quiz, Daniel had more points than all the other contestants combined. The whole hall clapped for him. His teachers and schoolmates looked at him in shock. No one could believe their eyes. Daniel stood on the stage quietly, not smiling. He had done what no one expected, but he knew the trouble waiting for him at home. News about Daniel's performance spread quickly. The judges praised his confidence, accuracy, and speed. The principal of the host school shook his hand and smiled warmly. You're truly gifted, he said. Very rare talent. The audience gave Daniel a standing ovation. Cameras flashed. Teachers from different schools came to ask about him. But no one from Daniel's school had much to say. They were still shocked. When they returned to school, the head teacher announced Daniel's victory to the whole school during assembly. We are proud of Daniel for winning the quiz competition, she said. He scored higher than all other students from different schools. Students began to whisper. Some clapped slowly. Some looked at him in disbelief. Wait, I thought he couldn't read. I thought he was dull. He beat everyone. Daniel stood at the back of the assembly, looking down. He didn't want the attention. He wasn't used to it. And deep inside, he was afraid. He knew Aunt Clara would not be happy. Later that day, an important guest visited the school, a scholarship sponsor who had attended the competition. He asked to meet Daniel personally. I like your courage and intelligence, the man said. From today onward, I'm offering you a full scholarship for all levels of your education, secondary and university. The teachers clapped. The principal was happy. Daniel's name was now known all over the school. But in Daniel's heart, fear was building up. He had done what everyone said he couldn't do. But what would happen when he got home? He was about to face the other side of his victory. Daniel walked home from school that evening with slow steps. His school bag felt heavier than usual, not because of books, but because of fear. As he reached the gate, he could already hear Aunt Clara's voice shouting inside. The door flung open as he entered. So, you went there and embarrassed my son, right? She shouted. Daniel stood silently. He knew this moment would come. You were pretending all this while. You made us believe you're a dullard just to disgrace Felix. You think you're smart? Before he could answer, she slapped him hard across the face. His head turned, but he didn't cry. Felix and the other cousins stood behind her, laughing and calling him names. You're a snake, Felix said. You stole my chance. Daniel tried to explain, but Aunt Clara didn't allow him to speak. She beat him with a broom, dragged him into the kitchen, and forced him to wash all the plates and mop the floor twice. She didn't give him food that night. He slept hungry, tired, and bruised. The victory he had won in school meant nothing in the house. No one congratulated him, no one celebrated him. Instead, they hated him more. But Daniel remained strong in his heart. He knew something had changed. He had a scholarship now. No matter how much they beat him or insulted him, he had a new future waiting. He had proved his worth, and deep down, he knew they couldn't stop what was coming. Days passed after the quiz competition, but things only got worse for Daniel at home. Aunt Clara's anger grew each day. She refused to allow him eat with the family. He had to wait until everyone was done, and sometimes there was nothing left for him. She gave him more chores than usual, fetching heavy buckets of water, scrubbing the toilets twice a day, and ironing everyone's clothes, including her own. If he made a mistake, she shouted at him or beat him. Felix no longer spoke to Daniel. He walked around with pride, pretending like Daniel didn't exist. The other children also followed their mother's lead. They mocked Daniel behind his back and blamed him for everything that went wrong in the house. You're not even part of this family, Joy once said. You should go and win another quiz if you think you're so smart. Daniel kept quiet. He didn't fight back. At night, when everyone was asleep, he still read under his blanket, holding on to his dream. He remembered the scholarship he had been given. That thought gave him strength. Even though his life at the home was full of pain, he knew he had been seen, finally, and the world outside was beginning to notice his light. But inside the house, he remained unwanted. One sunny afternoon, Uncle Ben returned home from a work trip. It had been weeks since he was last around. As he walked into the sitting room, he noticed Daniel mopping the floor, looking thin and tired. The moment their eyes met, Daniel looked away quickly. Daniel, Uncle Ben called gently. How are you? I'm fine, sir, Daniel replied softly. But Uncle Ben was not satisfied. He noticed bruises on Daniel's arm and the sadness in his eyes. He became suspicious. Later that evening, Uncle Ben visited Daniel's school to speak with the principal about the scholarship. He wanted to understand how it happened. The principal was very happy to see him. Sir, you must be proud of Daniel, she said. He shocked the whole district. His performance at the quiz was amazing. Wait, Uncle Ben said, surprised. You mean Daniel? Daniel represented the school? Yes, and he won. The scholarship sponsor was so impressed that he offered to sponsor him all the way to university. Uncle Ben was speechless. When he returned home, he called his wife and children into the sitting room. You told me Daniel was dull and lazy, he said calmly. You never mentioned he won a quiz. You never told me about the scholarship. Aunt Clara tried to explain, but Uncle Ben had already understood. He turned to Daniel. I'm very sorry, my son, he said with a deep sigh. I didn't know all this. Please forgive me. That night, everything changed. After Uncle Ben found out the truth, he was deeply angry and disappointed. He called Aunt Clara, Felix, and the other children again the next morning. I took Daniel in because he had no one left, Uncle Ben said. He is part of this family, yet you all made him suffer. Aunt Clara stood silently, her face full of shame. Felix looked down and said nothing. Uncle Ben continued. You punished him for being smart. You beat him for doing well. You turned his gift into a crime. Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes. For the first time, someone was speaking up for him. Uncle Ben turned to his wife. Clara, you failed him. You treated him with wickedness instead of love. You let jealousy control this house. He then faced his children. You all owe Daniel an apology. Slowly, they began to speak. I'm sorry, Felix said quietly. I was jealous. I didn't know you were that smart. I'm sorry too, Aunt Clara added. I treated you unfairly. Please forgive me. The other children also apologized one by one. Daniel nodded, but didn't say much. He accepted their words, but the pain in his heart couldn't go away so easily. Forgiveness was not the problem. The problem was trust. After the apologies, Uncle Ben offered Daniel a chance to start afresh in the house. He promised to watch over him closely and make sure he was treated fairly from now on. But Daniel had already made up his mind. Thank you, Uncle, he said gently, but I don't want to stay here anymore. Uncle Ben was surprised. Why, Daniel? Things will be different now. Daniel looked around the sitting room where he had been beaten, insulted, and starved so many times. The memories were too heavy to forget. I've suffered too much in this house, he said quietly. Please let me stay in the school hostel. After a long pause, Uncle Ben agreed. He respected Daniel's decision. Within a week, arrangements were made. Daniel moved into the hostel in his new school. He had his own small room, his own space, and most of all, peace of mind. He began to enjoy school more. He studied freely, joined clubs, and even helped other students who were struggling. He only visited Uncle Ben's house when Uncle Ben was around. He avoided Aunt Clara and her children as much as he could. Daniel had found his voice, his peace, and a place where he was free to shine. Daniel settled well into the hostel. For the first time in a long while, he could study without fear. There was no one shouting at him, no one giving him extra chores, and no one trying to stop him from being who he truly was. His teachers noticed his brilliance and encouraged him. He joined the school science club, debate team, and quiz group. Everywhere he went, people admired him for his quiet strength and intelligence. The scholarship covered everything: his school fees, books, uniforms, and even meals. He didn't have to worry about anything. Daniel continued to do well in all his subjects. He became one of the best students in the entire school. His name was written on the honor board, and many students looked up to him. Uncle Ben often visited him in the hostel. He brought food, books, and spent time encouraging him. Daniel respected him, but he never returned to stay in the house. Aunt Clara tried many times to make peace, but Daniel kept his distance. He had forgiven her, but the pain still lived quietly in his heart. Daniel never forgot where he came from or what he went through. His story was a reminder to others that no matter how much a person suffers, they can still rise. He had once hidden his light, but now he was shining brighter than ever. The boy who was once thought to be unable to read had become a star.